and gentlemen, please welcome this evening's guest moderator from AOL.com, Brian Balthazar, and tonight's guests, Diogo Morgado, Mark Burnett, and Roma Downey.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there, everyone. How are you guys?
So I want to introduce you all. I guess you just want to know that this is as exciting for me as it is for all of them. But you know, we all know the enormous success of the Bible miniseries. So now, tell me, how did you know it was the right time to make this film? A lot of people might say, we know this story, we've seen this film before. How did you know that this was the right time? Do you feel like people already know this story?
Well, I think that it's been 10 years since Jesus was on the big screen with Passion of the Christ. It's been almost 50 years since his entire life story was dealt with on the big screen in the greatest story ever told. And we just thought this was the time to bring the story of Jesus in a cinematic experience, larger than life, to feel it's an epic movie, sweeping and deeply emotional.
And there's some research, right?
Yeah, we were talking backstage. This is true. I'm not making this up. In England last week, they did a survey, which was on BBC. They surveyed thousands of British kids. Only 3 in 10 kids knew that the story of Jesus came from the Bible, which is crazy. I mean, it must be the same in America. It got worse. 46% of them had no clue about David and Goliath being in the Bible. And I think over that 60%, when they presented a Bible story and given a tick test, thought it was from Harry Potter. So it just shows you the biblical illiteracy. You know,
it's so awful. When we were out on the road with the Bible series, we were actually asked if Joan of Arc was Noah's wife. I'm not
That's
kidding.
mortifying.
Huh?
If this was a comedy show, it would be fun. But actually, this is true. So there is. I mean, you can't predict timing. Like, no way I knew that it was the right time for Survivor to be on television or the right time for a new singing show in The Voice. You can't predict that. So we couldn't have predicted it. But it turns out it's coming at the right time. When you hear these kind of surveys that people just don't know, and clearly the Bible is not taught in public schools anymore. So there's a whole generation who may grow up, be in their late 20s, go overseas on business, be in some meeting in Seoul, Korea, or Berlin, Germany, and someone says, that reminds me of like David and Goliath. And they're like, sorry, I don't know what that is. It'll look at them like, what are you, an idiot? You know? So it's good that people have got some consciousness. And clearly, with Son of God coming out, and then Noah, and then Exodus, it clearly is going to be a big year for Bible-based movie stuff. Right. And last year was even bigger.
And speaking of that, you mentioned a lot of the other films. There have been some scrutiny on whether they're telling the story the right way or the way that it's told in the Bible. How is it portrayed in this film in particular? How much attention did you pay to the detail as it was in the Bible?
I mean, the truth is, I think it happens the same thing as the Bible per se. I mean, you know, there's a lot of interpretations of the Bible, and there's a lot of ways of seeing it and reading it. But the truth is that we have to stop, be picky about the words, and truly understand the wider meaning of the words and the wider meaning of the message. The message was a message of love, of compassion. We can identify with that, regardless of whatever we believe, you know, and bringing to this new generation, this new audience, a cinematic experience as Son of God. You know, it's for a lot of kids out there, it's going to be the first time that they're going to see the figure of Jesus. You know, it's almost 50 years ago that the greatest story ever told, that we actually saw the whole life of Jesus on screen, was almost 50 years ago. So imagine, and we all know how we evolved technology, and you know, so today we can use the tools, visual tools that can really help us, you know, to tell the story as accurate as possible. So we're not telling the story about the donkey and the desert and the sandals anymore. We're talking about a profound and meaning, a really true, strong story about, and a close story about the whole life of Jesus. You know, it's epic, it's big, but it's also personal and intimate. You know, so it's a wonderful way for people that already know Jesus, that is in love with Jesus, fell in love all over again. And for a lot of people that never, like like Jonah's the wife of who? Come on, to understand who Jesus was for real.
There's such an immense responsibility not only in portraying Jesus and you playing Mary, but also casting those roles. I want to take a look at one more clip, the "Don't Be Afraid" clip, so we can, because you're absolutely transformed when we look at you right here, and then I want everyone to have a chance to see you again in this clip, and then I want to talk about how you go about casting such an important role. It's an amazing moment, a powerful moment. So talk to me about finding the right person to play Jesus.
Well, I think that we wanted to find someone that could bring a humanity to the role. We're showing that Jesus was the Son of God, but he was also a son. He walked the earth as a man, and we wanted to find someone who was strong, who had presence, but who also could play tender and be compassionate and show kindness. And we often said to each other, Mark and I, that we were looking for an actor who could portray the lion and the lamb. And I think that we found both of those qualities in Diogo Morgado.
And what was it like to take on that role? What a responsibility did that feel like to you? And how did you immerse yourself in this role?
I think being panic is part of the process. The first thing I truly never believed that I would be the one, to do something like this. Even when I did the first audition, after our meeting, actually was supposed to be a meeting of a 15-minute meeting. It turned out to be a 2-hour conversation with these two wonderful producers, and I was like, even then, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna do this. I mean, it's Jesus. How can you fill those shoes? How can you really connect with millions around the world? That it means so much, and you have to go straight to their soul. How can you do that? Out of fear, obviously, I started as a role. I freaked out, and I just grabbed all the books that I could. I started reading everything. I started watching everything. And actually, the thing was that they sent me out to Jerusalem. And it was actually in Jerusalem, while I was next to the crying wall, I was reading my books. And I tell this story over and over again because it was really a change of set for me. There was this father and this kid, they were praying next to the crying wall. And 2 hours later, when I was about to leave, they were still praying. And I was like, what I'm about to do is going to have a tremendous impact on this kid's life. Probably more than his father, because his father has, his own references and everything. But this kid, we're living in this visual world. I need to talk with this kid personally. We need to reach out and touch this kid's soul in order to change the world, as we so beautifully use that reference in the movie. So I felt really, really responsible. And as a father, I was like, I have this thing. I can't, not even for 1 second, be distracted. I have to fully immerse myself in the love of Jesus and the love of the scriptures, and I have to immerse myself in that and just keep feeding myself out of that. So it was a personal and spiritual journey for me. So it's really hard for me to put into words exactly what happened. It was just like, be available for that love.
Now, this was almost a year ago now that the miniseries premiered. 10 parts, never below 10 million viewers. This is on cable, sometimes up to 14 million viewers, beating out the major networks. Did you know it would be such a phenomenon? When did you know you were going to bring it to the big screen? I know you're also doing it in Spanish. Is that right?
Yes, and by the way, Diogo's third language is English. Portuguese and Spanish are his first languages, and the movie comes out same day, February 28th, in 2 other languages in America. So it will come out in many theaters in Spanish. Every theater, all 3,100 American theaters, are receiving a Spanish version, because we don't want that to be a secondary thought. That should be an equally primary thought. And a third language, which is going out far and wide, is also a Korean version of this movie, because it's a huge community. So we want it to be like so inclusive. And so that's what we're really, really going for.
When did you know you wanted to put it on the big screen? Even then?
We were in Morocco only in the first 6 weeks of filming. We saw Diogo on the screen, and Roma said to me, we should have been making a big screen movie, like a feature film. This is so good. And so we started to. We didn't know if it would get distributed, but we knew we could afford. We've been very fortunate in our careers that we could do it. So we made the movie. It was made before the series. And then we waited, and we eventually sent it out, and 20th Century Fox saw it, called us for a meeting, and said, we want to release this wide. We think this is fantastic. So as only last October, and Friday, this movie comes out in 3 languages, 3,100 theaters all over America. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, we couldn't have even dared to dream this big, that this would be happening to it. I mean, when the phenomenon of the series happened, it was just so humbling and so exciting, and even more exciting because the story of Jesus is so powerful, and it really deserves this standalone experience that you can, it takes you on a deep, deep journey, but it's also incredibly epic.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we throw the word epic around a lot these days, but this is truly an epic film. I want to look at another clip, the Feed 5000 clip, and I want to get on the back half and also talk about the production of a scene like this. Let's take a look. So what does it take to, you see that vast landscape of people? What verses do we see here? I should say, looking at this scene, what was actually happening on the scene of that actual production? How difficult was it to do a scene like that?
It's a huge size scene. What comes before that even is a boat scene where all the disciples with Diogo, portraying Jesus, are on Galilee and coming across a hillside and revealing, because they don't know. We made this authentically. The disciples are following Jesus, but don't yet really know who he is. He's a charismatic leader. Could he be the next King David? And they come over a hill thinking there's going to be no one there. And of course, there's 5,000. And it's just one of the big scenes. There's epic scenes in this, like walking on water. This is a full-on massive feature film.
And then that beautiful music, right? In any film, the music is like another character. And we had the great Hans Zimmer create the score for Son of God, along with Lorne Balfe, and the vocals of Lisa Gerrard, which reunited the team that brought you the musical score from Gladiator. And to hear this in the surround sound in the theater, it's soaring. It's one of the most beautiful scores I've ever heard.
And that's actually sparked somewhat of its own phenomenon, hasn't it? The music itself. I mean, you're touring with the music, is that right?
Yes, that's right. There's a Son of God and Bible music tour coming up. We have obviously the soundtrack is being released, and then there's an inspired by soundtrack with some of the great Christian artists of our day, and that will be going out on the road in the springtime and bringing a musical experience, all the different ways to celebrate Son of God.
And here's our son, who's 20, called me the other day and said, "Dad, do you know that you have a soundtrack for Son of God on iTunes?" I'm like, "Yes, I know, James." He said, "I was just looking for new music, and on iTunes, Son of God soundtrack came up." So it was funny for my own kid to be calling, thinking he's telling me that we have a soundtrack.
It was an accident. No, it wasn't just an accident. It's on iTunes.
There's there's a lot of intensity to the scenes in this film. How do you deal with the intensity of those emotions and those portrayals when you stop shooting? How do you do that?
Normally, you from my own experience, you kind of disconnect yourself from what you're doing. In this particular case, no. It was just a thing that, it came to me, it stood with me, and it stays with me. It was life-changing for me. Because it was a lot of things that, I'm 33 now. Curious.
Yes.
But there's a lot of things that I was not considering, thinking, meditating about. And this was something that it just had pushed me to that direction, and the stepping up for something. And like I said, every second was trying to, and we all were trying to tell this story of how to reach and how to touch and how to drag. People tend to ask me, why do you smile so much as Jesus? And I'm like, oh yeah, you were just trying to be cool, right? No, I was not trying to be cool. It was not random. It was like another way of expressing love. Because look, those times, crucifixion were a daily freak show. It was terrible. People were not living. People were surviving. People were just, they were not happy. The only thing that they had to hold on is their faith and their hope. So imagine how magnifying could be just a foreign, just passing by into the village or a city just with this huge smile. Imagine the kids, imagine the children. You'll be like, why is this guy smiling? Nobody's smiling around. Hey, Dad, are you smiling? Mom, are you smiling? No, there's nobody happy. So why is this guy smiling? I want to follow him. And that's the word, follow him. And you will know, and you will see, and you will feel. Yeah.
We are a people fascinated with miracles. Obviously, we see them play out in this film. Were there any miracles, big or small, that you felt take place on the set of this film?
People always ask that. It's the thing of the
miracles.
Know,
I think people want to know.
Look, the truth is, there's a line that I think it's beautiful. I mean, Jesus says to Matthew, says, blessed are those, you're blessed because you see me, but blessed are those who will never see me and still believe. And that's the true miracle. That's the true miracle. And when you're available, when your heart is open, the light comes in. As Roma so many times says.
That's right. It's one of my favorite Leonard Cohen quotes in the middle. He says, ring out the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. And that's how the light gets in. And I think that through the entire Son of God movie, we see a lot of cracked people, broken people, and I think that's where we identify. There's no perfect character in this film except for Jesus. Everybody else is just like us, people struggling with the things that we struggle with. And we wanted very much to show a reality, an authenticity, a grittiness, so that we could emotionally connect with the audience. Because remember, these guys didn't know they were in the Bible. They're just real people having, lives like we are, till they have an encounter with Jesus, and then their lives are transformed.
So how do you take 10 hours, however many hours you began with for a 10-part miniseries, how did you get this to be the perfect feature length?
Oh, we had so many more hours. And remember, the movie we knew about 2 hours 15 had to have its own point of view and a big cinema approach. And the movie really is from the point of view of the Gospel of John. And the movie starts on Patmos at Revelation. And it's John, an old man, looking back. He's the last surviving apostle. The others have all been murdered for their faith. And he's looking back, and he's like the last one. He's been exiled. And he's thinking back. And the first words the global audience will hear on Son of God, the movie, is, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God. In the beginning, it shows you Adam and Eve, and Noah, and Abraham. And it says the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we see the nativity. And you realize exactly who Jesus is. And of course, he's born, he starts his mission, and the disciples start to follow him. But there's this ticking clock because they're heading towards Jerusalem. It's a collision of the Romans under Pilate, the temple authorities under Caiaphas, and Jesus leading the disciples into Jerusalem. It's a huge collision course with Passover approaching, so there was a ticking clock. And the movie starts editing faster and faster. And you feel so tense, and you know this story. And you're really hoping this time it's different, that he's not arrested. He's not going to be crucified. But on the other hand, you know he needs to be so he can resurrect. So that's the way the movie ends up back at Revelation. So this is a very different point of view. I also wanted to mention, and you saw in that Roma played Mary, the mother of Jesus. So when you saw Mary there lifting the cross, that was Roma, which obviously was a very intense experience for you, Roma.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that Mary was the mother of the Son of God, but she was also the mother of a son, and those scenes at the Passion of Christ. You saw the scene there where she rushes in, and Jesus reassures her, and she helps him up with the cross. And I think she might have carried the cross down the street for him if she had been able to, as any mother would. And it was important that we convey the humanity in the story. I think that what we all remembered. Well, I remember a lot of those Bible movies that I saw when I was a little girl, and there was just something about them that everybody felt very holy and a little bit distant from our lives. And I think that something we wanted to do in this was to make it invitational, so that regardless of your faith base, if you already believed in Jesus, that you would come and that you would love seeing the story on the screen. But if you didn't know him at all, it was just a chance for you to come and discover and to see who he was, to see how extraordinary his life was, and and the opportunity afterward to engage in conversation. Bigger questions in your life. What's the purpose of your life? What role does God play in your life, and so on.
We have some questions from folks in the audience. I want to.
There's been so many movies made about the life of Christ. What makes yours different?
Firstly, what makes the movie different is this is a very gritty movie. It's been 50 years almost since the greatest story ever told. And great movie, obviously, and lasted decades. But it's not going to work for young teens around the world and young 20-year-olds who are used to seeing these big epic scale movies. Things have changed. And this is a very gritty movie. I mean, it was to the point that Roma was making sure every actor was putting their fingernails in wet dirt and their feet to make sure fingers and feet, if you look at Jesus' hands, everybody was covered in dirt all the time. I mean, we know from filming out there, you go outside for 20 minutes and the windstorm comes, you're covered in dirt and dust, very gritty, very authentic. And the tension, the political thriller of this movie, this is a thing that people are going to look at, people who know the story or don't know the story, and think, wow, I can really feel what it felt like in those days. And this is very scary. The crucifixion is very hard to watch. We have a PG-13 rating, but it's really tough to watch. But he does come back. As we know, he resurrects. The movie will be around the world, and people who feel the movie will react to the movie, and other people will just enjoy the movie as a movie, and in the end, it's a movie. We're not qualified to teach the Bible, obviously. We're not pastors. We're making a movie, and we're believing that churches, certainly all over America and maybe around the world, will be using this to teach their Bible courses for kids. And we already have it's been used already. It's been the Catholic Church and the Evangelical Church have both taken the movie separately and made their study guides using this footage. I mean, Rick Warren said to us 4 years ago, Roma, he said, I'm so glad you guys are making this because I'm so fed up using the 10 Commandments and greatest story in my classes. The kids are like, are you kidding, Rick? This is like 50 years old. Here's something new to be used.
Let me just add one thing, which is, it's a clever and really good question. The thing is, this is a message of love, true, also. And regardless of what you believe. And the thing is, there's not that many movies that are talking about love. And there's not that many movies and there's a lot of atheists, people that don't have a particularly, faith base or believe, reaching out to me saying, you know what, Diogo, there was something about that movie. It was something that I know it itched me and it touched me in a way that I'm still digesting. I'm still figuring out what happened, He did
a great job, right? I mean, I've got to say, Diogo, as you see on the screen, what a beautiful performance, and just so glad. I think you may be, in an English language film, the first ever Latin Jesus.
I'm not Latin.
Portuguese is
I'm
Latin.
Hispanic.
The series, The Bible on History Channel, I heard some statistic that it was like one of the most watched series or something like that. How do you feel like, that came to be? And I have a question for Diogo. do you ever feel like you were led by the Holy Spirit, or did you ever have times where you prayed on set, you know, like take on this role of representing God and Jesus?
All these double questions, it's confusing. Let me answer first on the series. Absolutely, I think that God was moving. I think that people are hungry for hope, and people are hungry for connection to God, and people are hungry for purpose in their lives. And 100 million people watched the Bible series in America, and it continues to ripple around the world. And I think that it speaks to this feeling of looking for hope. And I think that the series brought that, but brought it in an exciting and cool way that engaged a whole generation. There were a lot of young kids that watched the Bible series, and so we were very encouraged by that. And we are also Christians, you know, who made the series. It was important to us that the project began with prayer. I think every project begins with an intention, and the intention here always was to glorify God and to bring a message of hope and love and truth.
And it's a funny thing for you. So yeah, 100 million people in America. In Canada, the Bible series beat hockey, which is the most astounding fact of all. Went around the world and eventually got on television in Hong Kong and went #1 in Hong Kong. So it just shows you the global reach. And on the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, the last question. Definitely. I think there's no way of you portraying, of taking a task like this without guidance, you know, and without a spiritual guidance. And I can tell you there's one scene that you guys can see on the movie, which is the scene where Jesus is talking about the Holy Spirit, precisely, with Nicodemus. And I must tell you that was one of the magical scenes that we had. That has one of the elements that happened on set. It was quite magical, which was right when I was about to say those lines about the Holy Spirit. Jesus does this wonderful analogy about the Holy Spirit being like the wind. We never know where it comes from or where it blows. And right, I was about to say that line, and out of nowhere, and when I say nowhere, it was like nowhere. There was no wind that day. It comes this wonderful breeze. Everything was just shaking smoothly, beautifully. Everybody was just looking to each other, moved and touched and in tears. And you know, and then I paused, and I said my lines, and that's actually the take that's in the movie. So I think this is a great example of what you were asking. Definitely.
It looks like there's a wind machine being turned on to blow his hair, his robes, the trees. There was no wind machine. This was a still night. As he was about to say the word wind, a massive, sustained, supernatural wind, the Holy Spirit came across the Sahara Desert and into the oasis. It was stunning. And Diogo stayed right in the moment and didn't say, wow, that was a strong wind. He just carried exactly where he was. And when you see that in the movie and you look, you remember where you heard this, that is real.
Hey, my question is for Diogo. When you were talking about going into the meetings with Mark and Roma about just talking about for the role of Jesus, what finally made you convinced to take on the role, or what did they
convinced me, actually. Now, the thing is, I grew up in Portugal. I grew up as a Christian, so I knew this was big. I realized, you know, how exciting it has to be to tell the Bible and portraying Jesus, obviously. So actually, when I sat with these two wonderful persons, when I sat with them, what I was waiting for, I was like hoping to be just like a 10-15 minute meeting, you know, just, you know, to know each other, you know. It turned out to be a 2-hour conversation with a cup of tea, and we were talking about the meaning of the Bible and the purpose of the Bible and the stories in the Bible, more than actually, you know, the producer points of view and the actor points of view. So we were just debating, and they were shining and they were glowing. So when I left, I was like, I don't know exactly who they are and what they want to do. I just want to be part of this, because it's really rare to see, you know, producers that are about to start something just shining and proudly talking about something that I knew what it was, you know. So I was like, these are the best people to take this task, and I want to be part of this.
Hi. Before I ask my questions, my daughter told me you're so hot, in a good way, in a pure way. She thinks you're hot. Anyway.
Thank you.
If you had to do this movie again, and I know you were led, and what stories from the Bible would you add in your film that you wish you would have? I know, because you were limited.
Yes, it's so much. I mean, you know, the Gospels are so big. You know, the truth of the matter is, then it becomes one of those old movies of 4 hours long. I don't think people are going to commit to that. You know, we do have the feeding the 5,000. We do have the raising of Lazarus, the walking on water, the miracle of the fish, and then, of course, there's when Jesus says he will cast the first stone, and the healing of the lame man. So there's a lot of the miracles.
The calling of Matthew.
The calling of Matthew.
And then, of course, the passion, the Last Supper and the passion and the resurrection. I mean, you know, and the great news is, for the stories that you might be missing, there's a great source book that we can go back to. But, you know, as best we could do in the few hours that we had, we wanted to give this great overarching view, the grand narrative of Jesus' life and the grand embrace of his love, and to tell the big sweeping story. And, you know, I think that you know, that we've done that. We offer it, and we're so excited. We're on the home stretch here. We've been on the road for several months, and we're, you know, we see the opening date just a few days away, and it's just really exciting that we get to share this with everybody.
I would say, I was just thinking, because it's a big question, and it's hard to just like be up here like this and just answer. Everyone's got their personal thing. For me personally, if we were to go back and add one small scene, I think it would have to be where the disciples, where Peter sees Jesus speaking to two people when he's separate, and he figures out that it's Moses and Elijah. And it's like, whoa, it's starting to realize, whoa, who is this guy? Is that Moses and Elijah? And then Jesus tells him, you know what, don't tell anybody what you've seen. And it's really like supernaturally revealed. And then there's a moment where Peter says, but if you're the Son of God, doesn't biblically Elijah have to come first? And Jesus says, he already has. And Peter realizes it was John the Baptist. That would be an epic moment. But, you know, there's so much we could put in. But that's just for me personally. But you know, you can't get it all in. But the great thing is we can even have this discussion, because I'm hoping, or we're hoping, people go watch the movie and go, oh, I wish they'd put this scene in, and look it up, you know. And like if you go online now, like Liberty University, a bunch of student filmmakers just made short, like 2-minute films around Son of God from stuff they'd seen. It's epic. So young filmmakers out there making stuff, and it's inspiring. It's great that people are just stepping up and putting this story out there. And it comes back to where we started. Think of that awful, disheartening story out of England last week of how few kids even know the story of Jesus is in the Bible. It must be the same in America, and hopefully this will make a difference and teach that. And we're grateful to have spent the time with you guys tonight. Thank you.